Welcome back to the Vessel Podcast, where we discuss the highs and sometimes lows of getting to know God. I am your host, Leanne. And of course, y'all know I got to have my guests, and I got two very special people with me today. And we're going to have a good time. So I have Tekita, who is a returning guest to the pod. Welcome back, Tekita.
Hey, I'm welcome. Well, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And I have Nikita, who is a first-time guest on the pod. Welcome, Nikita.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So these are three people who now are friends through our mutual friend Tekita. So Tekita, thank you for inviting Nikita so we can get this conversation started. So the purpose of today's episode, we're talking about Red Lip Theology by sister girl Candice Marie Benbow. And I'm gonna tell you, I think Tekita, I reached out to you like when I first kind of discovered her, and then we were like, oh yeah, I know her, or had heard of her or whatever. I saw her on that Kev on Stage interview that she did. He was doing a series, and I discovered her there. So I've been following her ever since. And so Candice is a theologian and also a womanist, and so she has some very interesting takes on I guess on just her Christian walk and all of that, but it's pretty cool. And I wanted to take time today to just talk through her recent book, Red Lip Theology for Church Girls Who've Considered Tithing to the Beauty Supply Store When Sunday Morning Isn't Enough. And so of course that drew me to this book, and we all read it, so we're going to talk about it. So this is what I want to do. I'm going to open with just a general question, and then we're going to go from there. Okay, is that good?
Yeah.
All right. So initial thoughts. So after you read the book, had time to sit with it, let it soak into your pores. What were your, first couple takeaways from the book? Anybody can go first. Tekita, I'm gonna throw it to you.
Okay. I felt like you were gonna do that.
I was.
Honestly, I just was blown away. I think what sat with me most with the book is how relatable it was. Especially being a Southern Black girl, raised in the church, and then entering this stage in your life where you're really trying to ask these questions that you're like, but was it really like that? Is that really what God said? Or is that just kind of what you've told me? And so it was validating to have somebody question these long held lessons and practices that we just kind of accepted and maybe didn't question in that same way. So it was a breath of fresh air to be like, yes, thank you, somebody asking the right questions around here.
I literally wrote breath of fresh air right here.
Mm-hmm.
I literally wrote that. So yeah, Nikita, what you think?
I was like, why couldn't somebody write this when I was growing up in the church? I too am a Southern Belle and grew up in the church. And now at this big age, I just wish we would have had more transparent conversations about the things that Candice brought up in this book, because I think it would have saved a lot of us a lot of disappointment, and would have allowed us to give ourselves a little bit more grace. You know what I mean? And so the book, I literally had the opportunity to read it before it actually became public, because I was on her launch team. And I was like, my God, today, I was like, she's going to change lives with this, because I know for me, we sometimes think we disappoint God. And I feel like the Black church is great, but it also has done a disservice to Black women. And I feel like she is the voice for us to have that conversation. And I just wish it would have been written sooner when I was growing up. So I'm happy we're here now, though, but I just wish. I'm like, wow. Yeah. Mind blowing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the topics and themes throughout the book just was some things that we couldn't talk about freely, just challenging the status quo of what it means to be a Black Christian, and especially what it means to be a Black woman Christian. And church lady talk and the things that we were supposed to do in church and not supposed to do. And I think how she told the story of her mother and the influence that her mother had on her, but really how the church treated her mom when she was pregnant with her, I think spoke to a lot of stories of young Black girls, and how even the father, Candice's father, didn't get that same type of treatment. And so it just kind of left her out to dry. And that was a testament within itself, kind of how the church has really disappointed us, and failed us in certain ways. But I think overall for me with the book, like Tekita said, breath of fresh air. But also there were some things, I didn't agree with, that I haven't really, got on board with. But for the most part, it was like one of those things I'm like, finally somebody was able to put into words what I've been thinking for so long. So I'm grateful for her voice, and being so vulnerable to share her story with us. I think one of the questions that really came to my mind is how she has come to some crossroads in her journey. So I want to ask and pose this question to both of you. Have you ever come to a crossroad in your faith journey, and kind of what was the outcome of that?
I don't know that I would necessarily call mine a crossroads, right? Because I think when we think about crossroads, it means like you're going either one way or the other, and you're kind of having to leave this other path behind. And I don't know that I would necessarily say that I'm feeling like I'm having to choose from this fork in the road of my spiritual journey. I think where a lot of kind of what her perspective, where her perspective tends to evolve is really just around these womanist concepts and how do they fit into this very patriarchal view of the God that we've been taught. And I think the part that I probably most resonated with when she just talked about serving a genderless God, because, I think about the way God is talked about, just in the traditional sense and the way that I've always known. But then more so as some tenets of womanism and Black feminism are more mainstream, and you hear like, I met God, she's a Black woman, and just really trying to grapple with what does it mean for God to be a Black woman, what does it mean for God to be this man, what does it mean for God to be made in this likeness of me, but also be my father, so it's kind of interesting to try to figure out what does that look like. And I really appreciated her kind of diving into this idea of a genderless God, so that you don't have to confuse God with all of these other preconceived pieces that people just put on them based on our own gender norms and our own concepts of how God is supposed to serve and move in our lives. So I think a lot of what I've kind of grappled with is trying to figure out which parts of my faith are truly rooted in the word, truly rooted in the relationship that I have with God, and which parts are really not from God. And I think it's fair to say that not everything from a Southern Black traditional church Baptist, missionary Baptist upbringing is straight from God. It just can't be. So I think that's kind of where I am in trying to figure out which parts are truly authentic to God's word.
Nice. That's cool.
You say that so eloquently.
Listen, my girl can articulate some thoughts, okay?
Okay.
Yes. But I would say, so in my journey, like I've never felt like I had the permission, to really challenge what I've been taught. And I'm not saying this to say that everything that I was taught growing up about my faith and about God, I don't agree with, but there are many parts that I did have to unlearn because of my own experiences with God. And so those are some things that I really had to sit with. And some of the things that she talked about, that Candice talked about in her book, I had to sit with because it did challenge my upbringing, and it challenged what I even today still believed. But I'm open enough in my journey and in my relationship with God to welcome, these new ideas and these new thoughts, because I never had to really think any different. A lot of the people in my circle, my Christian circle too, we all think similar. And so to have this and to have Candice's voice, I think has been eye-opening for me. And so for me, in my experiences though, one of the things that I had to think about was, okay, God said that, that I was created in his own image. And so why is it that I feel this way about myself? So all the insecurities about body image and things like that, I struggled with. growing up, like big time. And I could not come to terms with God for making me this way. And God's supposed to be this, this person that is, that created me in his own image and all of these things. And I'm supposed to be good. But why don't I feel this way? But it wasn't until really into my adulthood that I was able to say, okay, you got to let these things go, and understand that, God is bigger than that. And he didn't want you to feel that way. So those are some of the crossroads that I came to, but have kind of overcome in time. So Nikita, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, it has just been a challenge to when I feel like, because it says that no matter how far we go, what we do, God's love will never depart from us. But I know, like, when you feel like you have made decisions that are unpleasing to God and feeling like, surely, like, if I do this, then God won't do this. So that type of mindset. And I think, like, my struggle has been thinking that if I make a misstep, then that means that God won't bless me. And so I know Candice talked a lot about us being able to humanize God and honor our own humanness and understanding how God's love won't shift or change based on the decisions we might make in a particular season of our life and the consequences that can come from that. And so I know for me, that has been something that I have had to, in a sense, come to terms with and unlearn. Like, if you do this, then God won't bless you. Or, for instance, if you have sex outside of marriage, then your marriage won't be blessed. Those types of things that kind of like make you feel bad about yourself. You know what I mean? And learning that God's love doesn't change based on what I might do. And whatever I do, I did what I thought was best in that particular moment or instance, or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, I'm just learning to give myself grace and know that God will love me no matter how much I might mess up or I feel I have messed up. So she was very reaffirming in that, because, we will never be perfect because we are human. And so I think taking away and stripping away that ideology of perfectionism and that God won't give you certain things if you're not checking all these different Christian girl boxes, if you will.
Yeah, that's good. And that actually is a perfect segue to our next question, because one of the questions here is just talking about what line in the book really snatch your edges. Okay. And so this one is the one for me. It says, we are a good creation because God says we are, full stop. And she says, we are not perfect. At best, we are stumbling along trying to make sense of the world and our place in it. We will make mistakes along the way. We will forget we are inherently good, and will learn lean into the desperation that accompanies believing otherwise. In doing so, we will hurt ourselves and others. And then she closes out with this: this will grieve God's heart. Even then, we will still be good. And so I think for me, that kind of solidified my place with God. And so it tells me, you gotta let some things go. You are still good, no matter your past, no matter what you are, going through right now. Remember that you are still good. And so often we get caught up in this idea of perfection. Social media has really kind of warped our idea of reality. And I know it has affected me in certain ways, but I think that if we come back to things like this in the beginning with creation, that we are good, I think that could solidify a lot of our insecurities and shortcomings from there. So yeah, I'll toss that one to y'all. I want to hear what were some lines in here that you really had to kind of sit with, and it was just like, oh my gosh.
So many.
I know.
So mine came from what chapter is this? Hold on. From God and Other Reformed Helicopter Parents. On page 57, and it says, what does it mean to make a decision you thought was the best you could do at the time and give yourself enough grace to see it as such? I learned to see God's love as that grace. When hindsight becomes perfect vision and I want to go back and do things differently, God's love shape shifts to enable me to accept the truth. I did what I thought was right at the time for whatever reason, and if faced with the same reality, I would choose differently the next time. Moving away from belief in judgmental consequences concerning my decisions reminds me I'm human. I can choose to trust myself and prepare myself for whatever comes from choosing me. And that just slapped me all across the room because again, we've been taught like, you have to be selfless and put others before yourself. And I do believe God wants us to do that, but not in a way where it's to our detriment and we are not able to honor our own humanity. And so I just thought that was a really powerful line. Because I think we can be harder on ourselves sometimes than other folks can be. And then when we're talking about church folks, that can get very toxic. So that just really helped me in learning that I can choose me, I can give myself grace, and God will still love me no matter what I do. Now, that doesn't mean I should just go out here and be all reckless, but that when you are operating in a certain season, you are making certain choices, and God is going to love you regardless, and he will see you through that. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. That's good.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I was trying to get to the one. It was one about blackness, and I'm almost there. I just had my hand on it, and I'm literally almost there. I just literally was here. But there's a few. Here it is. So I'm on page 76. This is the chapter. I think it may also be the God and Other Reformed Helicopter Parents chapter. I feel like I'm still there. Yeah. So sidebar, I also live for the footnotes in this book. But
yes.
So one of the quotes, blackness is a gift and a blessing. The burden attached to blackness isn't mine, though. It is the sin and shame white people carry for denying our divinity. And I get it. If I had spent centuries trying to make myself synonymous with God, I would deeply resent the existence of the very ones who proved me to be a lie. That's why I'm honored Black is the way God wanted to present me to the world. Those Lexington Klansmen, Josh and Mr. Williams, and those Christian racists at my doctoral program couldn't take that away from me. Nobody can. And I think that stuck out to me. Oh, and let me just read the footnote because I think that this is hilarious. These names have been changed because I'm not about to pay a bigot any of my hard-earned money.
Yes, sir.
So I thought that was hilarious, but I think for me that one is especially timely. I've recently relocated, as you all know, and so having to try to readjust to doing the type of diversity work that I do in a space that is just simply entrenched in white supremacy in a lot of different ways, both within the institutions that I work for and just within the area that I'm in geographically now. You need reminders like that to just understand that your Blackness is not a mistake. It's very intentional, and there's a reason for it. And in this direct opposition of whiteness, sometimes it does make folks question, like, dang, maybe we were wrong. Maybe we weren't. Maybe we weren't the ones that we were trying to like build all these systems to believe was the only truth. And so I thought that one was one of the many that stuck out to me.
Those are good. That was good. But yeah, like y'all both said, there's so many things we could pull and just talk all day about from this book. But those were all great lines. Talk to me a little bit about how Candice talks a lot about her life experiences. She talks about her sexual assault that she experienced. She talks about the racism. She talks about the sexism, all these things that she has experienced in her life. And to me, kind of the crux of all of this is how it has shaped her relationship with God and also her theology. I mean, all of this bore the red lip theology. So talk to me a little bit about how your own life experiences have shaped your perception of God.
I think for me, when you grow up in the Black church, and you mentioned this once we started having a conversation about, and Tekita mentioned it too, about how, is it really that, or am I just functioning this way because it was taught to me? And I think once I got older and I began to experience Jesus for myself, I feel like my relationship with him went to another level. I think sometimes in church, it can become very like mundane and how we pray and how we worship. And so to take all of that away and just show up to God as myself and talk to him like he's my friend, my homeboy, which he is in my mind, really set me free, right? And I know the Black church has done a lot of harm, but I think when you can experience God for yourself and you know that is happening, it just takes your relationship with God to another level, and nobody can convince you otherwise about how you should feel about it. And so I think just having transparency and the boldness to say, I want to get to know Jesus for myself, and not because, you know what I'm saying, I grew up in church and this is what folks told me it's supposed to look like. Because oftentimes I think God looks however that particular person might be in their life, their perception and their understanding, and so by doing that, it has really transformed my faith. And I know for a fact that Jesus saves, and I have definitely had moments in my life where, just in a dark season, and I prayed and God turned it around. And I know it was God because of just how, whatever the experience was at the time. And so I would just say, getting to know Jesus for yourself and kind of taking yourself away from the things that people have taught you what Jesus is supposed to look like, feel like, be like, you know what I mean? So,
and I think you can use those things that we're taught as point of references, but it also comes back to, again, how you personally experience God. So yeah, I'm with it. Yeah. Tekita?
I would agree. I think I was trying to find exactly where in the introduction, but I remember that she talked a lot about, giving God back to Black women.
Yes.
And I think that was probably one of the early lines. I probably text both of y'all and was like, okay, this is really about to be a ride here.
Yeah.
I knew then, I was like, okay, this is about to be a lot, because I think similar to Nikita's point, Black women we are legitimately the most devoted, the most spiritually adept, like the most involved in the church. Like, I think I always think about the example of, like, again, super Southern traditional Black church that I grew up in. And I remember that women couldn't even walk across the pulpit. But then I think about how we were the ones who were coordinating all of the pastor's anniversary programs and the choir day anniversaries, and then staying after for the second service to make the plates and just doing everything, that it was just an expectation. I remember very early on being told that I was emceeing church programs as I was walking through the door of church. So, and just knowing that was an expectation. And so I think about how, there's always been this expectation for Black women to serve God with no questions asked. And when you have the audacity to ask questions, it makes you look like this ungrateful believer, or this person whose faith is not really serious or isn't authentic. And we're like, we the realest ones out here. Can we just ask? Like, can we just at least, have that space to truly understand God without your filtered lenses on what God was supposed to be for us. So I think from my experience that the perfectionism piece is probably what rings out the most to me throughout the book. And she just kind of talks about how, asking these questions just freed her from a lot of these bounds that either were placed on her, either this rigid set of instructions that we get very early on as young Black church girls, that you're like, if I go by these rules and somebody else doesn't go by these rules, we sitting here looking at each other at the same table. So really, what was the point? Like, I think about those were some pieces that she brought about. So I think we have to be okay with it. Like, the faith in general and the Black church in general has to be okay with Black women asking questions. Because more than likely we're pointing out something that hasn't, one, freed all of us, but two, is leaving a lot of Black girls behind who aren't getting to know God's word.
Absolutely. That's good. I think for me, we've been using the word freeing a lot in this conversation today. And just in general, after reading this book, I felt some sense of liberation in some of the things that have been kind of heavy on my heart and in my spirit, just about our faith journeys and how and how it has truly shaped who I am. And some of the things that, you know, I hold close to my heart is kind of, it almost sometimes feels like a burden on the things that, you know, you were taught to believe. And then you figure out, or you simply ask the question, and you're able to kind of process that and figure out what it means to you. I think has been very freeing for me after reading this. So I'm grateful for Candice and the courage she had to do this, because I was just kind of in preparation of today's episode, just kind of reading some of the reviews of the book, and they were varying. You know, it was from excellent, highly recommend, to there is no theology at all in this book, it's trash. She don't know God, you know, all these things. And I'm just like, wow. But that's just the nature of it and the nature of this type of literature. So yeah, anyway. All right, so as we are kind of about to close out and wrap up, I just think with this book, I am kind of left to my own thoughts and some things that I need to sit with for a while. And I just wondered if there was anything that you were kind of left on the edge about it, of the book, that maybe you need to sit with a little while longer. Maybe you're not quite where she is at on this topic, or you need to like kind of just, you know, think about it a little bit longer. Are there any things left that you need to think about after reading this?
I think similar to how Red Lip Theology was born out of this experience of hers that kind of ties all of these life experiences through this one common thread, and she's able to kind of shape her faith. I almost feel like I am left with trying to figure out what's the common thread in my experiences and in my faith. Maybe mine might be like a pink lip. I don't know, probably not. But I'm just saying, you know, but no, but seriously, I think I think what I appreciate most is just the way that she's been able to find what connects it, to connects her life back to God and back to her calling from God, her journey with God. And I think that it makes me want to just kind of look back over, especially the pieces about like decisions you've made, you know, situations you've been in, especially in those moments where you're like, I was doing the best I could at the moment, and kind of releasing your, you know, and even also, like she said, also being aware when you were making trifling decisions. Like there were a lot of moments in here that I will not put out publicly. I was like, ooh, been there, you know. So and it just it's tough, you know. It's tough to kind of ask yourself those questions. I think I'm sitting with looking back over my life, like the elders say. And
looking back over my life. Come on.
And honestly, just figuring out like what my red lip theology looks like for my life.
In that same area vein, I really feel like this book is very much raw truth telling. And so when I think about myself and my own faith journey, just thinking about if I am going to share my truth, how can I do that authentically to who I am as a person? I appreciated her vulnerability and just her audaciousness to say what needs to be said. And I feel I am an audacious woman, but some stuff, you know, like Tekita said, you be like, I'm holding on to that until the good Lord calls me home. But I know she has touched so many Black women with this book because we understand, because either we've experienced it or that's where we are right now, things like that. And so she has given me the courage to think about my own truth and what does that look like. If I decide to share that one day, what will that look like? I am excited. I hope she writes another book. I really would want her to talk more about being a Black woman and singleness in the Black church. I just feel like her perspective would just blow everybody out the water. So she has just given me more of that oomph to say, I'm gonna tell my truth and I'm gonna speak my truth, and I'm not gonna be afraid of it, even if folks feel like, you know, there's no God in that. But I just also wanted to say, in the Bible, Jesus is always with the folks that people have counted out.
Come on, preach.
Disregarded. People have said, they have no value. And so I just think Candice is doing a good job of helping people be authentic to that, because that is who Jesus cares about. I mean, when you think about the woman at the well, he told her like, hey girl.
That's so crazy. I gotta interrupt you. I'm so sorry. But today at church, went to church today, and we do a little children's hour moment during service. My children's hour moment was the woman at the well, and how it was.
Look at God.
I am, this is wow. And we talked throughout that about how, it was uncommon for a Jew to speak to a Samaritan woman, but Jesus found it in his heart to actually, spark that conversation. I need some water, and talked about the living water and all of that. So it's so crazy how this has come full circle in this conversation. But you're right, how Jesus, it was always found talking to the person who they felt was unworthy of love, unworthy of the connection to Christ, to the living water. And that's the beauty. And to me, that's the beauty of my relationship with God, because even when I feel like I'm unworthy or I'm not enough, I know that God has seen enough in me to say that I am good. And that's all I need. So,
but y'all, what's so crazy about, it's not crazy at all, but no shade to Brene Brown, but when I think about like all the, follow me here. So I think one of the ways that when we think about which tool is one of the most like restrictive tools for Black women is shame. It's shame, is thinking about like, it keeps them in secrecy, it keeps them in silence, it keeps them detached from community and detached from support, but most importantly, detached from God. And I think when we think about the woman at the well, when we think about how Candice talks about her story, if you own your own shame, then nobody can use it against you or keep that from connecting you to God. And I think
living in your truth.
That's right.
Yeah, like living in your truth, and that like if you weaponize your own shame, against sin, then you really like you're going to be unstoppable, because what can you do and what can you say about somebody who's already given their shame to God? Because they say God already knows. We already talked about this. He already know what I did. There's nothing you can use against me. And I think we talk about the liberation, we talk about, the vulnerability pieces. I think what Candice has done is shown us what it looks like to be on the other side of shame, and to be on the other side of like, look, I did this, I sat in it, I wrote about it, and gave it to God privately and publicly, so that you can do that too and not be so bound by shame that honestly was never real to begin with. So I think that that's another piece that ties all of that together, is that, if you can get Black women to release shame, child, just imagine.
The shackles will come off.
Come on.
The shackles will come off. And I think that God really loves his daughters as well. And so in that same vein, I would agree with you. Because the woman at the well, she was shook because she knew she wasn't living right. But God's like, hey, I know all of that, but I still want you to drink this water so that you can live a life of abundance. So
that's a good way. That's a good period point right there. Wow, that was great, y'all. This has been good. This conversation has been great. I'm sure, like I said, we could take each chapter, each essay that's written in this book and just talk for days about it, because there's so much relatability as Black women to Candice's story in many aspects of it. So again, shout out to Candice Marie Benbow for this work of art. For this gift to us. I feel like it's a gift to us. And I'm grateful for it. So thank y'all too for your voices on this podcast and lending your time. We busy women. Y'all some busy women too. we made it work, and I wasn't gonna go without doing this. So I'm grateful that we were able to accomplish this. So thank y'all.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you for having us.
It's always a pleasure to be here at the Vessel. Leanne, I'm going to embarrass you. You're doing great work.
Oh, man.
You are blessing people. You are bringing folks closer to God, even in your silence, but especially through your voice. And so I appreciate you giving us space to be here, even though we shift. sitting up here looking crazy because I just got off the road. But I wouldn't do it for anybody else but you.
Ooh, thank you. Appreciate you. Well, with that, peace. Y'all have a good night. Thank y'all.